Jim sent me a fairly detailed amount of biographical information. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to say two things. I don't know anybody who has worked hard at writing and becoming a writer as Jim Tritten. Jim always has projects going on. He's shared a few of them with me over the years that I could read. He's constantly in motion, attending programs exactly like this. Jim always has a workshop in progress, a meeting in progress, a writing group meeting in progress. If you learn anything from Jim Tritten today, it is this. If you want to become a writer, work hard. Jim is the epitome of that. Some of that is reflected in the fact that he recently won this year a gold medal in MWSA for fiction. The title is Love and Lies, Call Me Eve. I don't think it's a short story, but it's a good one. So with that, I'm going to give you Jim Tritten. Jim, would you take it over? And I believe I have given you screen share.
Okay, let's see if it works. Can you all see the slides?
Yes.
All right. Then I will go ahead and start. And today's talk is designed for the military writers specifically, and also for people who write novels primarily, or want to write novels and may want to consider taking on short stories first. Okay, so first of all, what is a short story? Now, I think it was Ken that was having some discussion with us before it started, and he was talking about people have encouraged him to tell his story. So think in terms of starting a short story with, you're sitting in the bar, you're at your Thanksgiving dinner, you're at a restaurant, you're at a reunion, and there's some friends, and you're telling a story that everybody knows already, but you're telling it because it's a fun story and everybody likes to hear it again. If you can tell that story, all you got to do is write it. You're not trapped with all the rules that there are for novels, but you do have a theme in the story somehow. So if it's that story about Uncle John and what he did that one Thanksgiving, and it ends up being, well, you know, that's Uncle John. Okay, well, that's a theme. It's a short story. It's not as elaborate as a novel. And there's usually only one conflict with very few characters. It's fiction. It's a tale told by a storyteller. If you instead want to base it on reality, that's still fiction, historical fiction or creative nonfiction. So if you're thinking about writing something that's a memoir and you want to hide the people or the location or both, you can do that. That's fiction. That can be done in a short story. And the point of talking about short stories is it converts easily into a chapter, which can then be submitted to the MWSA anthology. Let me go into some more differences and similarities with novels. Think about a short story starting out with a scene in a novel, not even a whole chapter, but just a scene. And then if it's a little longer of a short story, it could be a chapter in a novel. It's this length that determines the differences and the similarities with novels. The more length, the more you can write scenes. And with these kind of guidelines, these numbers are not locked in concrete. Flash fiction, less than 1,000 words, sometimes even less than that. Short stories, somewhere between 500 and I've seen 17,000 words described as a short story. You still have a beginning and a middle and an end. And the bottom line is that the number of words is determined by the audience that you're trying to pitch the short story to. If it's going into an anthology, they'll usually tell you it's got to be no longer than so many words, and it may even have, it has to be more than a certain number of words. There's still a beginning and a middle and an end to a short story, but you don't do any introductions, prologues, or author's notes. The setting and the time still have to be put into the story, but you got to do it real quickly. It's got to be in that first paragraph, and it doesn't have to be fed in over time, which I often do when I do novels. The character development is required, but it's It's as little as possible, as long as you can still carry the story forward and have a character arc. If you're doing flash fiction, you're not talking about doing any character development that's of any significance. You don't throw in tons of backstory in a short story. You do that in a novel, and there's ways to do it, but in a short story, you very rarely put in anything more than a few sentences here or there. And at the end, you have to resolve the conflict, and that might be as late as the very last sentence. It could be the whole story doesn't make sense until that very last sentence. I've written a story like that, and it's won awards. And there's obviously no epilogues. So let's turn to why you should write short stories. Well, first of all, they can probably take less time, and they're generally less complicated. So they can become building blocks for chapters, or at least learning the skills for writing a chapter, which is part of a novel. The return on investment, your time, can be really very high. You get feedback from editors and readers, your critique group, and then if you're writing and it's not intended for publication, you've got that internal satisfaction of finally having told that story that nobody else has ever heard about, and you've gotten it off your chest. What kind of short stories? Memoir is a great place to start. So Ken was talking about, he would have, people have urged him to tell the story about what happened in Vietnam. That's a great place to start. And you can fictionalize it, of course, or write about something that you know about. So you take the story that happened in Vietnam, you make it historical fiction by changing the names and the locations, or you can do creative nonfiction. I know a fellow who's writing a story about what happened in the sandbox with a real general, and he's writing it as science fiction, so it's the future, and he's telling the exact story he wants to tell, but it's not true. What are the kind of stories you like to read? Is there a themed anthology or a magazine that only publishes certain things and they give you ideas as to what you should write? Or a response to writing prompts? There's at least one person who's logged in today who takes the writing prompts given by a publisher and he writes a short story for each one, and he's been extremely successful at getting that done, David, haven't you? Or try a totally new genre to just gain the experience. Even if you have no idea how to write romance, for example, and your ultimate desire is to write romance, is to write a novel, unless it is really a male-oriented novel that is set in a setting where there's no romance at all, you're going to have to put some romance into your fiction novels. So you might as well learn how to do it. And the best way to learn how to do it is to write something yourself in the romance, and then see how that goes, see where that goes. Where do the ideas come from? Well, I'm going back to that Thanksgiving story you've told year after year after year. It's just, people know the story, you know the story, you've been at the bar, you've told the story, you go to the reunions, write it down. Maybe you keep letters and journals. I know, again, there's at least one person, there's at least two people that are on the call today that have kept journals over the years. And that's the raw material for which you can then write. You can come up with ideas and say, well, that could make a short story. That could make a story. If you take classes on short stories, they're going to give you writing prompts. And they may even give you a time limit. For example, we have an excellent program where I live, where you meet and you get on a train, you give you the writing prompt, you walk over, you get on the train, and you take an hour and 15 minutes to get where you're going to go. And when you go, you get out, you write on the train, and when you get out, you go to a coffee shop and you read what you wrote. An hour and a half, that's not hard to do. Or ideas that just keep popping into your head. You go, wow. Usually that's right after you take a shower, right? Writing as therapy as part of medical treatment. The VA is big on this. They have you do exposure therapy, and part of the ways to do that, and I know there's at least a couple of people in the group who've gone through that program, they ask you to write about what happened, your trauma. And I won't do that, for example, but I will write a fictional account of what happened to me, or it'll be about somebody else. And that's good enough. That's a good way to do it. Borrow from other short stories and movies. Just people take really good ideas and they put them out there, and you can borrow the skeleton. You can borrow the spine of the story, change the location, change the characters, change what the conflict is over, but it is not illegal or unethical to maintain all of those things and then use that as the basis for your story. Some easy ways to get started. Most of you are on Facebook or you have blogs. So you've seen those stories about, look what my dog just did, and it ate your couch. Well, that's not a very interesting story, but what's a really good short story would be, what the hell was I thinking about getting a puppy at the age of 75? So that's a one way to go about doing it. Take an issue that you know about from work, and instead of writing about the grand scheme, such as being a teacher, how rewarding it was, wasn't that wonderful? Write a short story about how you helped one student, just one student, or how it is best to teach that one specific lesson. That's a short story that you can do. Or volunteer for an organization like Military Writers Society of America and Southwest Writers and write short stories advertising the upcoming event. I think I did that in 2019, as some of you will remember. You got a hobby. Take your hobby and turn it into reviews. I love to do movie reviews and book reviews when I was in school, but I've done music reviews. You can do theater reviews. You can go to the Internet Movie Database. You can write a review of that movie, and then you've written in the same genre. You can talk about that genre because you've written a whole bunch of things about that genre. You like mysteries, go look at all the reviews you wrote about mysteries and see what you can come up with for a short story about why people should read mysteries, or what is the point of why are mysteries so popular. Make sure you Google P.D. James and get her solution to that question. If you're taking classes, invariably you're going to get an assignment. They want you to write. So let's just take, for example, they want you to write a book review. They want you to read a book, and then they want you to write a book review. They're going to give you feedback, and your other students are likely to give you feedback on what needs to be fixed. Make the changes, see if it's publishable. People love getting book reviews. So that's an easy one, and that's one of the first places that I started. You got an old thesis or dissertation, rewrite the conclusions as a standalone and publish it as an essay. I did that, and I even got paid for it. Experiment. How much time does it take to write a novel or a nonfiction book? Well, if you're really good, it's 30 days with National Novel Writing Month, or it could be many years. And you probably can afford to take some time to experiment with short stories before you tackle the big one. And you can do things by learning the art of writing before you tackle the 80,000 word book. They're building blocks. Document your favorite recipe as an essay, for example, and then collect them all and publish a cookbook. That's what Jane Butel does. She lives in my little village of Corrales, New Mexico, and she publishes lots of books, all of which come from individual stories. They're just individual recipes. You collect them all together, and you can do things like make it personal with family anecdotes. David Lange is familiar with a publisher in New York, which asked for recipes from different places. I published one, but the trick was you had to write the family anecdote. You had to write something that told the story about why this recipe was kind of interesting. So you get a little short story and you put a recipe out there at the same time. I've never published in a cookbook before. Or you could take, and you've all seen those where you do they have cooking stories on the Hallmark channel and they make them into mysteries. Why not? Want to write a book about airplanes? First, write a short story about one individual airplane, maybe the one that you flew or you knew you flew in, and then write about some more until you have enough for a book. And then that's what this guy did, an Italian who wrote a book about a a particular squadron and all of the planes that it flew and all the locations that it was and all the missions that it has. And he made a nice book, and he put one of my stories in the middle of it. So maybe starting an 80,000 word book or novel is a daunting task. Think about flash fiction. Something like 80 words, not 80,000, 80 words. Just write a short story in 80 words. Have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Then see if you can ratchet that up to 800 words. And then start looking for what other people want for their short stories. They usually 3,000 is a good number to be aiming at for a short story. There's a couple of approaches to all writing that's done in fiction, either with an outline or without an outline. Either be a pantser, you just sit down and let it all flow, or you go ahead and sketch it all out and then fill in the blanks with, from the outline. I have used both approaches. I use both approaches. It just sort of depends on where I am and what I'm writing. I have written with 15-minute prompts and gotten them published. I told you about 1-hour prompts. It's a good way there's good advantages of doing it both ways. You get feedback when you write these short stories. You can get feedback, and you must join a critique group of some sort. If you submit it somewhere, you're going to get feedback from editors and contests, and they're going to let you know how others view your efforts. So if you're writing for something that another person is intended to read, you need to get that feedback. On the other hand, if you're writing for something and you have no intention of ever publishing it, which is legitimate, then you've got it done, you got it off your chest, move on to the next topic. External recognition. These short stories are you can add them in as into anthologies, you can put them up on blog sites, and you can enter all of these things in contests. There's lots of different contests. For example, I will bet you that your state has a chapter of the National Federation of Presswomen, and they have annual contests, which includes chapters from books, and it includes short stories. It includes blogs. And I've been very fortunate, Yasmin and I have both been very fortunate in winning both at the state level and the national level. I heard somebody talking about veterans writing groups in California. And in this case, your local VA hospital probably has a recreation therapy program. And within that recreation therapy is going to be the creative arts program. And they run an annual contest. You can win at the local level, and then you get submitted, your stuff gets submitted to the regionals and to the finals. And that's a great way to realize how good your stories are if they are winning at national levels. And then you can add award-winning author to your author pages, your Facebook pages, query letters, and your bios. And you'll feel better when you get recognized for your writing. There's a picture of 3 of the anthologies published by the Corrales Writing Group, and they were the first 3 that we entered into the Military Writers Society, and we were fortunate enough to win. We've won awards for every anthology we've ever submitted. So if you're inclined to let other people see your short story, that's a good path, but it's also not the only path. You can write a short story and bury it away. In fact, I think I saw Kathleen Rogers making a comment about a poem that she wrote that was in the latest MWSA anthology, in which she said, I wrote these, and she described the time, and she put them away, and she had never really intended anybody to ever see them. The one I submitted that was published was submitted to the time capsule in New Mexico to be opened in the year 2112. And I pulled it out and let everybody get a peek at it ahead of time. Join a critique group. I'm going to say that. I've said it once. I'm going to say it again. You really need to have people that will read your stuff, and not your friends. We're not talking about your friends who are going to, and your even worse, your family, because they're not going to want to say something to you that is a critique. They're going to, oh, that's really great. God, that was wonderful. Just do some more. No, you need somebody who's going to point out to you that on slide 14, you have not used correct English. Jack. Rewrite and then polish. You do not need to hire an agent. That's a really good thing about short stories. You only need to do, you only have to have an agent if you're trying to do a book with a mainstream traditional publisher. And even then, it's not always the path to success. Submit your stories to anthologies, contests, or various publications. Learn that if you're writing for yourself, that's one thing. But if you're writing for somebody else, that somebody else is going to have to say, yes, I like this, that's a different skill. And you're going to have to get a tough skin, and you're going to have to just do what you have to do to get published. Facebook's got excellent sites. Just Google, or not Google, just search on Facebook for submissions, and then for novels, submissions to anthologies. There's tons of places you can learn to send your stuff to. Sometimes it'll cost you a modest reading fee. My business model is I rarely ever submit anywhere that requires a reading fee. And if you want to, you can self-publish a short story at zero, absolutely zero cost. Just learn, you have to learn about Kindle Direct Publishing. And unless you choose to have a paper proof copy sent to you, you can publish it, proofread it online, put the cover together, and you'll get an ISBN, and you will be a published author in a lickety split. So the title was Short Stories Are Fun. How are they fun? Look in that upper right-hand corner. That's a picture of a woman who is face down in a grave. Now, we had somebody in the Corrales writing group who wrote about that. And it was her mother's funeral, and she fell into the grave. And it's a hilarious story. It made her laugh when she wrote it. It makes me laugh when I read it. And take the nasty stuff, put that into a different category. You don't have to write about the nasty stuff. You can, but if I write about the nasty stuff, I don't let anybody ever see that. You're going to interact with people. By definition, if you're writing short stories and you're doing the things that I've talked about, you're going to get other people involved, and that's going to be fun. You'll learn new skills faster by doing short stories than novels. And the skills are going to be usable in the novel. You'll become a role model for your family and your friends. Oh, wow, Uncle John, he writes. Wow. And you can become a published author faster than if you write books. The last slide, the takeaways. Let's see, the first takeaway was you got to work hard. That's what Jack said. Experiment. Short stories don't take years to write. You can get in and out of a genre in months, and you can see if you like it. And that's a heck of a lot better than trying to write a novel and getting 50,000 words into it, and you're going, yeah, I don't really like this, and then giving up because you didn't like that genre. You can use new skills. You'll learn new skills, and you can use the building block approach. You're going to learn how to write for somebody else unless you're absolutely committed to only writing when nobody's ever going to see it. And if you want the slides, ask Jack or send an email, and I'll leave this slide up because this is the last slide. You can send an email to me at that, and I will be happy to send you the slides.